Why do we get in the way of our horses if we're just trying to cram information in? And if they're resistant to that, we put on more pressure and we send their nervous system in the opposite direction. So we're setting them up not to be good students, even if they would be. And it's amazing the horse that can come out for you if you work with the nervous system.
Dr. Stephen Peters brought a horse brain. And what he shows me with it, what's physically happening inside an empowered horse's brain versus one stuck in learned helplessness, is one of the clearest things I've witnessed of covering horse sport, horse behavior, and horse training. We also dive into dopamine, allo-grooming, and we close with Charles Darwin, specifically the part of his work nobody quotes. Start with part 1 if you haven't. This picks up right where we left off. Before we begin today's episode, I'd love to ask for your support. The simplest way to support this podcast is to hit follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. It helps the show reach more people who care about the same things that we do. Better horsemanship, deeper conversations, and a more thoughtful future for horses and the people who love them. And if this podcast has meant something to you, leaving a rating, a review, or a comment makes a huge difference. So thank you for being here. I really do not take your time or attention for granted. Now, let's dive into today's episode.
All right, this is the horse's brain cut in half, okay? So for your landmark, this area here is called the corpus callosum. It's white because it's myelinated and allows both hemispheres to talk to each other.
Yeah.
Up above this, it's not delineated. You know, that was to my chagrin when I first saw brain surgery. It wasn't color-coded like my textbook.
Right.
But this is the cingulate gyrus, okay? If we do neuro exercises with our horse, right, we give them the ability to have an internal locus of control. Let them know their behavior matters. That you do this, look, here's my signal, and then my timing's good, and you got your release, right? That felt good, and I let you go back down to homeostasis. That's pendulation. And eventually, what this cingulate will be able to do is send a chemical called GABA. Glutamate is the major excitatory neurotransmitter in our brain. So about 50% of our movement and everything we do in our brain is going to be what we call glutamatergic firing.
Okay.
Right? GABA is the major inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. So if we are pendulating and our horse is getting comfortable, dialing it up, dialing it back, right?
Mm-hmm.
If our horse gets comfortable doing that and can go farther and farther, what that cingulate can do is produce GABA and influence the hypothalamus, which is right down here. Here's the thalamus. Hypo just means below.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want people to get caught up in the jargon. I wish I had more time. I do in my horse brain science clinics to explain all of this. But forget about the jargon because this needs to be usable for you and to help you understand this fascinating structure. And if scientists have labeled it with all these things that allow them to impress themselves up in an ivory tower, it helps no one.
Correct.
Right? So the cingulate produces GABA, influences the hypothalamus, and the hypothalamus wants to speak to the pituitary, speak to the adrenals, and pump out that cortisol, right? If our horse learns, because we started this whole thing with self-regulation, if our horse learns that I can produce GABA and I can inhibit that message going down, then that message never puts cortisol in my system, and I can be more courageous. I can be more curious. I'm safe because even if I start to get a little nervous, I know that there's a way that I can produce neurochemicals that will actually calm me.
Okay, hold on. I want to break that down. I really want to break that down for my own sake.
Yes.
So you basically just explained from a scientific point of view what an empowered horse looks and feels like from a scientific point of view. Okay, so explain it to me again.
Here we go. Let's talk about the stress circuit first.
Okay.
So that's the hypothalamus. Hypo, below, like hypodermic, underneath the skin.
Okay.
Hypo.
Hypo.
So here's our thalamus.
Yeah.
Everything goes to the thalamus first, the sensory, except for smell, the thalamus first, and then the thalamus sends it out where it needs to go. Underneath that is the hypothalamus. What's the hypothalamus's job? To regulate the autonomic nervous system, to determine whether this is a situation that needs to go to fight or flight, whether I need to put a bunch of cortisol into your system for you to deal with.
So would it be right to say that the hypothalamus is the decider between whether we are in parasympathetic or sympathetic?
Yeah.
Cool.
The barometer of the autonomic nervous system.
Cool.
Right? So the
autonomic nervous system is the parasympathetic and the sympathetic.
Yes, ma'am.
Together. Okay.
My star pupil. So HPA axis, that's what you see in the literature, means H for hypothalamus, P for pituitary, and this kidney bean structure here is the pituitary.
Okay.
Will send hormones down to the adrenal glands. They sit on top of your kidneys, and they produce cortisol.
Yes.
The granddaddy of stress hormones.
Yes.
It's good if I need to immediately deal with a situation, right? But if I'm not allowed to recover and it becomes chronic, now I'm chronically pumped with cortisol. So I can't find my way back down to homeostasis. I'm stuck up here you know people like that. You just touch them on the shoulder and they're going through the roof.
Well, you're talking about PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. Chronic stress locked into the system.
Yeah.
Right? So that's our stress cycle. HPA.
HPA axis.
Here's our cingulate. It's the tissue up above the corpus callosum. It's working actually like a frontal lobe for the horse.
Okay.
So when we talk about frontal lobe, it makes purposeful decisions for the horse. The horse can make purposeful decisions. So what the anterior cingulate will do is produce GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter. We're inhibiting the signals that go from the hypothalamus down that route.
Oh, whoa. Okay. So for a horse that's empowered, quote unquote, then they're going to have more GABA.
Or they can produce it.
Or they can produce it faster or better.
Or they can just produce it.
Cool. Versus a horse that is not empowered, that's in a state of helplessness.
Does not have access to recruiting
GABA.
the GABA.
Whoa.
And it has to deal with the stress.
And therefore it goes straight from the HPA to the pituitary and then releases serious amounts of cortisol.
And if it becomes chronic, that's why your immune system just shuts down after a while, because you just get pumped full of chronic stress.
So GABA is really important. That's like the scientific factor to explain an empowered or confident horse versus a non-empowered horse.
And that if I'm using pendulation where I've got sympathetic arousal, but then my horse learns to come back down, sympathetic arousal even higher and come back down, the cingulate is starting to produce GABA.
Cool. So this is why when we go out and do hard things and we come out okay, this is what I talked about with Dewey Freeman podcast. When we do hard things and come out okay, it actually builds a neurochemical that's going to like reinforce our confidence going forward, both in humans and in horses.
And because you've done it, and you've done it in a certain nervous system state, right? It gets wired in that state.
Whoa.
Right? So you want it to get wired in a state where you feel competent in doing that thing, because now you have access to it. And now you fire it and rewire it, and you become so good at what we're asking them to do.
Yeah.
But let's say we force that horse where they don't feel confident, they're sympathetically aroused, and they don't get to come back down. what we're doing is we're actually starting to wire something in that state of arousal, in that state of high cortisol input. So now every time we ask that of that horse, they're going to feel it as threatening. They're going to already be stuck in defensive physiology, not in feeling good about it, not in my behaviors matter, what I do matters, right? It's over here where, oh crap. And then they don't have access to the options, right? So they've got these fragments floating around. And so they try to figure it out, but they're confused. And then we say, oh, this horse is struggling here. The answer is more pressure. Now you've sent even more sympathetic arousal. They can't figure out what's up from down, and they come apart. And you stupid horse, you know this. My horse knows it when they're in that state that they learned it in. The more we practice that, then when under pressure, we'll go there. That's what they do in the military.
Yeah. So I want to explain an exercise that I did with Tig Maynard when I was rehabilitating my mare lady's association with learning, right? She had a negative association with learning. She had a negative association with pressure because of her lived experience. So we used positive reinforcement training, and we used 3 different stations. One that was easy, one was a little harder, one was a little harder. And it was really important to cycle between them, because she sometimes wouldn't always get, like at the beginning, she wouldn't always get the hardest. So let's say we had one was a pedestal. She'd stand on a pedestal and we'd click and reward. Then the other one was like a ramp that would mimic like the ramp that you'd go up a trailer, right? And then the other station might be like going like around something, like going like around like a traffic cone or something like that, which for her, sending her away was a more challenging exercise for her at that time. And what was so interesting, and I want you to explain this to everybody from a neuroscientific point of view, was the pedestal was easy. She loved the pedestal. It also gave her back a stretch, like from a biomechanical level. She loves this exercise. So that was her easy one. Then we would go to the ramp. That would be a little bit harder, but we would get it, and then we would move on. And it was always really important that we would transition from these. And if she would go around the traffic cone or not get the traffic cone, we would then break, go back to the pedestal, establish a sense of confidence, establish a positive association, and then we'd go back through the circuits and then challenge her to get all 3 correct. But what was very important, which Tig Maynard really emphasized, was it's important not to drill one too much over the other. So you would because each of those exercises would play into themselves. The confidence that she would build at the pedestal informed the confidence that she would build at the ramp, because she was getting that dopamine when she would get the pedestal right. And that positive chemical would inform her and her approach and her mindset, you could say, to the ramp. And then she would feel so good when she got those 2 right, that when I asked her to send her away around a traffic cone, she was much more interested in seeking the solution. I want you to explain to everybody what's taking place on a neuroscientific level.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought this up, because we're also look at neurochemicals in isolation.
Right.
So we talk about dopamine, 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 dopamine. So that's out there. Think of it more as a mixed drink. Actually.
A cocktail, as Martin says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do we need to get arousal? Well, we need norepinephrine.
Yeah.
If we fill the glass full with no ice, that's a pretty strong drink.
Right.
So that norepinephrine is probably going to send us to fight or flight.
Is that also the chemical that we release when you and I are in hyperfocus, which is a common neurodivergent?
Acetylcholine.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So let's say our cocktail's half full with norepinephrine, right? We're not to fight or flight, but, well,
we're aroused.
We're aroused.
Yeah.
When we're there, that's where we can tap into acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is going to help us really focus our attention, right? So we're excited. We know something's going on here.
Okay.
Right? And so to get around that first obstacle, maybe what it took was a cocktail of a certain amount of norepinephrine, acetylcholine, and and dopamine. Well, if we just continue to drill, like Tick said, if you just continue to drill there, what happens is it's not as arousing. Your norepinephrine cocktail goes down.
Yes.
If you go down to a certain point, now you start to lose attention. So
And it's not as arousing because it's not novel.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to go around this 6 times? Damn, we've done it. 7, 8. This is boring.
Yeah.
This sucks.
Yeah.
So our norepinephrine, we're not aroused. We're not threatened by this anymore. Our norepinephrine level goes down. Eventually we lose attention. So we lose our acetylcholine. And how much dopamine are we going to get out of this after we've done it 6, 7 times?
Very little.
Very little. So look what we've done to our cocktail. So now we introduce the second thing. Norepinephrine comes back up again. Acetylcholine comes back. We get a bigger dopamine hit off of that. Now we're going to, the third time, this is more challenging. We're going to send you away.
Yeah.
So what happens when that happens? Well, we're social animals. We're built that way, right? Especially horses. So it's a social animal. We're going to send them away. So they're going to lose oxytocin. The oxytocin is going to down. They're not going to feel as safe.
Yeah.
So we're relying on that dopamine hit being big enough on that third round so that that's okay. When we call the horse Buddy Sour, or, they're linked to the barn, they have a lot of oxytocin there because it feels safe and they feel bonded. There's social bonding that's taking place with the other animals. We pull them out. Now we have oxytocin withdrawal, and another chemical, serotonin, that leads us to emotional balance is going to go down as well. So we need to go out of our way to change that cocktail to make our horse feel better. And that's not always in just mindlessly drilling them to make that go away. So let's go back to that third obstacle. What we've built in those first 2 obstacles is a prediction that I'm going to get rewarded if I do this.
Yes.
Right? So now there's no prediction error. My prediction pays off. I have to trust on that last one that if I get an oxytocin withdrawal that feels like, I'm not connected with somebody, I have to do this out there on my own, it's a little more challenging. If it's a little more challenging, our acetylcholine goes up, our norepinephrine goes up, our acetylcholine goes up, but our brain is making a prediction, but I'm going to get a bigger dopamine hit if I follow through with this. If they don't, if we got after them and we drilled them, then that's a prediction error. And that's really bad because your horse's brain is going to go back and recalibrate and say, I thought I was going to get that big dopamine.
Yeah.
And I was vulnerable because I didn't have as much serotonin. I didn't have as much oxytocin. I didn't know about this, but I was willing to trust it, thinking I was going to get that big dopamine hit. So it's important.
Well, and I'm going to add that one of the really important elements to that exercise was when she would, and this is something that was really reinforced by Karen Rolfe, was Lady as a particular horse responds super well to rest, to relief. So when she would do something right, we would make a huge deal about it. And we would drop the lead rope and scratch her up the wither and relax. I would sit down on the ground. I would do like a whole bunch of exhales. And the relief effect for her was huge. So then there was association created when she got when she accomplished that harder task, then she really got a big come down. And she really got like a good come down. Like she really got a big rest and reprieve, which was important for her at that time in her journey in rehabilitating her learning style.
And it's not just semantics. You brought up a really key point in that we learn pressure and release, right? But release isn't always relief.
Okay, before we get back into the conversation, I want to share something that has genuinely changed the way I feed my horses. One of my horses, Lady, who I talk a lot about on this podcast and who some of you know, is a sassy Appaloosa and a notoriously picky eater. She does not like feed with a lot of fillers or chemicals. She is sensitive in every way, including her skin, which has always made feeding her a careful process. She lets me know quickly when something does not agree with her. Finding a feed that she could eat consistently and that supports her overall well-being has mattered more to me than anything else. Total Equine by Total Feeds has been that feed. When I first tried Total Equine, I was super skeptical. It looks more like kibble than pellets, and I judged the look of it right away. Also, it's affordable. And as someone who's grown up deep in the competitive world of show jumping, I immediately interpret quality with price. Nothing in the horse world can be both good quality and affordable, right? Well, wrong. My horses have never looked better, and they love it. Thanks to important trace minerals like copper, zinc, and selenium, Lady's digestion is steadier than ever. Her weight is great, her coat quality improved measurably, and her top line has stayed intact, even with time off after our epic road trip across the country. That alone would have been enough to earn my trust. But that trust was tested in a big way when we took Lady and Galano across the country. Traveling over 25,000 miles with your horses demands consistency and nutritional integrity to balance the stress and demands of the road. Having a feed I could rely on no matter what made a huge difference. Total Equine kept both my horses nourished and settled through long hauls, new environments, and constant change. They are one of the only horse feeds in the industry to use Norwegian kelp, providing essential iodine, minerals, prebiotics, and thyroid support. I cannot say enough good things about Total Equine by Total Feeds. Developed by Dr. Harry Anderson, who I now consider a friend and ally in the fight for good horse care in this time of inflated prices and impossible economics in the horse world. I am careful about what I recommend, especially when it comes to nutrition. I've never spoken publicly about horse feed before, and I am proud to speak up now. Total Feeds has earned its place in my barn because it supports my horses in a way that is noticeable, measurable, and reliable. If you want to learn more about their approach to feeding, visit totalfeeds.com or pick up a bag at your local Tractor Supply.
Release isn't always relief.
Correct. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Only the horse can tell us if it was relief. If I'm spurring my horse and whipping my horse and then I stop, right, because my horse has done what I want, yeah, I've released, but my horse, knowing I'm up there with those big Spanish spurs or I've got that whip in my hand, do they really feel safe enough to get release? Get relief?
Yeah.
So watch your horse, look at their muscle tone for one. Look at all the little signs that are in your horse. Are they actually feeling relief? And relief is huge. What is relief? It's you get to go to homeostasis. You get to go to your natural balance.
And so would the difference between, so let's say if I hadn't given her that ability to go back to homeostasis and I just maybe walked her, but she's not actually getting any relief, then what we're talking about is it allostacking? Whereas she's basically in allostasis, but she's so nothing's being asked of her, but she's not relaxed. She's either in a place of anticipation or she's in slightly stacked where she knows something's coming. So therefore she can't actually receive relief, but she's experiencing relief.
One of the things we haven't talked about, I think is one of the most important, and that's recovery. You have to be able to come back down, the pendulation. And so, people will ask me, well, is that 1.5 minutes or and it's as long as it takes, and start to look for changes in your horse, and every horse is going to be different. But without recovery, same with us, our brains are still coping with everything around us, the allostatic load. Until we lower the allostatic load, sometimes put them up at night, out in the pasture with the other horses, they're likely learning more about what they did with you than if you did the thing with them again and again. Because you got out of the way, they felt safe, no information competed from the outside, and they were able to process. Now you could, we've talked about this, slap your horse, attaboy,
Yeah.
and
Not
create
great.
a shock, right? Because the same would happen to you. Let me put you in a functional MRI tube and have you do something and then sneak up on you and how you doing in there, and your brain reacts to that stimulus. So no outside distraction, and your brain gets to replay. This is called hippocampal replay the information you put in there and consolidate it. So now, even if you put your horse under pressure, it's likely that they're holding that information. But if we sat on our horse and we said, well, I'm just going to walk my horse around now, we're going to go on a trail ride. You could do that, and it's different enough, and your horse might still consolidate some of the information. But walking on your horse's back is not neurologically silent,
No.
right? They're still wanting to know if they're going to get a signal from you, wanting to know if they're going to come to a stop, wanting to know whether you're going to change gaits. Their brain is alert. The reticular activating system is alert to whatever signal may come next. Even if you change and shift your balance, that's sending information to the brain. Ideally, we would like to silence that as much as possible and let the brain consolidate the information. Sympathetic arousal is encoding. Acetylcholine, I'm paying attention, I got it. What are you going to do with it? If I keep demanding of you, that's going to fade away until you can consolidate it. When you come back down to homeostasis, you consolidate it. I got this, right? So why do we get in the way of our horses if we're just trying to cram information in? And if they're resistant to that, we put on more pressure and we send their nervous system in the opposite direction. So we're setting them up not to be good students, even if they would be. And it's amazing the horse that can come out for you if you work with the nervous system and allow this process to take place.
It reminds me of when I've worked with Martin Black. It's really fun because he'll work with a horse for like 5 or 10 minutes and then he'll switch it out. And that's why it's actually really fun. When I got more horses, I realized that I was going to be able to enact a whole new training protocol because most of my life I've had 1 or 2 horses. I've never had multiple. And then actually people think, oh my God, Noelle, like, how are you going to do it? And I'm like, yeah, but it's great because you can work with one horse for 10 minutes and then switch it out and work with another horse for 10 minutes and switch it out. You're not drilling their brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when, again, coming back to learning even about the neurodivergent brain, you learn like that sometimes sprints or hyperfocus in short bursts can be tremendously effective, and that actually paying attention for really, really long periods of time without super hyper engagement can be really taxing, right? It can be basically allostacking for us or allostasis.
It takes such endurance to just hang in there.
Yeah.
And then we lose all the good chemicals. And we've read that paragraph 13 times now without really letting it
Yeah.
sink in. But what we're learning is if you need intense focus, and then after, we think there's a limit somewhere around an hour for a human, and then you do something called non-sleep deep rest, where you let your eyes go soft and you're really not thinking of anything. You're just kind of staring off into the distance. And you do that for a period of time. What happens is you're locking that information away. And you think that you could continue for 2 or 3 hours solidly that focused. But just like people think they can multitask for 13 things, 14 things. No, with each progressive thing, you get worse and worse over time. Well, the same thing with our attention span. Our brain says, okay, time out, let me lock this in. But we often don't do that. And even medical students, when given ways to learn, do you want to learn this procedure in 8 hours in a day? Yeah, let's do it and get it over with. But they've done numbers of studies, and it's not like they put all the dummies in one group and all the smart ones in another. They said, okay, let's break this 8-hour task down into 2-hour segments over 4 weeks. They find out at the end of the month, all those things are in long-term memory, locked away for those students who spaced it versus massed learning. And in all the mammalian studies, the exact same kinds of findings. So some things are arbitrary. I'm paying you to spend an hour with my horse. I expect you to ride my horse for an hour and to work on this and drill on this until this gets in there. That's arbitrary. That's a human-made structure,
Yes.
right?
Of-
That's in
Well,
place.
it's the concept of value, right?
Right.
It's the concept of time management, value, time for money. These are all constraints that these are constructs that are not informed by equine neuroscience or the way the horses learned.
Right. Right.
So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. And this horse may need 5 minutes. And if we go beyond that, we're actually interfering. This horse may need 15 minutes, maybe a full hour, but after an hour, you're gone for the day.
Yes.
And I tell everybody, don't believe a thing I say. Go ask your horse.
Yeah.
Just go ask your horse, what do you have to lose? And practice this, and you'll be amazed at what you'll find. Go be a scientist. That's what you are when you're testing out things. If you follow a very rigid, traditional set of methods, some of those methods work. They work tremendously. I'm not saying let's do away with those. What I'm saying is that every nervous system is like a snowflake. Know what state that nervous system's in. On Tuesday, I might give this cue, and you might be able to read it very subtly and give me that behavior. On Wednesday, something might have happened. Maybe you're sore, maybe it's windy, maybe there's too much noise. That same cue isn't being responded to by the same nervous system.
Now that we've talked about essentially like the nucleus of equine learning and equine states of being from a nervous system point of view, I want you to talk about all these other aspects. Let's say they're called like the petals on the flower that also play an important part.
Yeah, and I can do this looking at humans and in horses.
Cool.
And here's where the similarities are uncanny. In that I ran a memory clinic, and I was a director for a clinic for brain health. And they certainly wouldn't let me open up my own clinic in a hospital if I didn't have tons of evidence-based, peer-reviewed science to support these things. And so we looked across the spectrum at what allows brains to be their optimum. And one of the things we need is social contact. Brains cannot thrive in isolation. They weren't designed to. And so we need touch. The Romanian orphans who had their diapers changed and they were fed food, but there weren't enough nurses around to
Physically touch them.
And they had tremendous, when they got adopted out, tremendous emotional and psychological deficits, even cognitive deficits as a result of not having touch. Exercise is another. If you create an exercise program for yourself, an aerobic exercise program where you exercise 3 times a week, then you're 30% less likely to develop a dementia of any kind. Why would that be? Well, because exercise allows the movement of blood and oxygen through our system, and all the little vessels deep in the brain get fed by our heart pumping harder and forcing more blood and oxygen into our brains. So they hold up better over time with exercise. So we need to exercise, and we know why, because we need to force more blood and oxygen to small vessels in our brain. If we become sedentary, blood and oxygen won't reach the end of those vessels, and they'll start to die away. And then we see on neuroimaging brain atrophy. And diet is huge. Fats, saturated fats and sugars will feed a dementia. So now let's take this to our horses.
Yeah.
What we're finding is horses that have metabolic syndrome have lack of exercise, oftentimes. There's stress in being isolated from other horses because our biology is designed for us to be connected in their herd animals so that their detection system, their decision making, all is enhanced by being in a herd, and they feel safe in a herd. If we're feeding them, sugary grains versus allowing them to forage, then they can get laminitis, they get metabolic syndrome, and they end up with insulin resistance. Well, there's some thinking now, and with scientists, with humans, that a form of dementia may be related to insulin resistance in the brain.
Wow.
So can horses dement? I've talked to a equine gerontologist. Believe me, there's like one out there. And she says that, oh yeah, those types of horses, they'll wander, they'll get lost even in their own pastures, their behaviors.
Well, but we see evidence, we see cases of canine dementia. So if there's canine dementia, then why wouldn't there be?
They don't remember things that we once taught them.
Yes.
Hey, you know better than this. Well, what we're finding, and it's no surprise if you're a naturalist, is that we thrive in the environments we're designed, our natural habitats. So we are so, in many ways, disconnected, even though we're connected digitally, disconnected from others, disconnected from the natural world, disconnected from those very environments that help shape our brains in the first place.
Yeah.
So, in that regard, there is now the 5 domains. And so instead of the friends and foraging, those things were based on helping make sure that our horses survived. Well, had those things taken care of. The 5 domains has been designed by scientists, it's evidence-based, to help horses to thrive. And so
in domestication,
right. And so health is a big one. Forage is a big one. Social interaction is a huge piece of this, and they all fit together. And allowing agency and a sense of internal locus of control is vital to every animal. Feeling like your behaviors matter in the world. And your brain is designed to help you adapt and adjust to the world as best you can. And our brains know if we get experience, then we're going to be better able to maneuver and navigate out there in the world. And so that's the message I would like to send to people, is basically allow yourself to be open enough to take in new information, to be aware of things, even if you don't agree with them, know why you don't, so that you're taking neuronal networks that are already in your brain and attaching them. The more open you are, the more you attach those together. And now the broader your knowledge is, meaning you have more options. Now let's put that back on the horse. Allowing our horse to have options, allowing our horse to figure things out, allowing our horses to solve problems, setting it up to make it very easy for our horse to find their rewards. All we have to do is light that match, and our horses will shine. It empowers us because we can determine generally how many neurons, how many dendrites, how many connections our horse is going to have. We can determine that by being aware of how to do that, or we can shut it down. We can drill rigidly. And when you do that, when you socially isolate a mammal and you make their behaviors very rigid, I've done this even as an undergraduate, and you take those mouse brains from those situations and you weigh them after 6 months, and they weigh much less, those that haven't had an internal locus, those that haven't socialized, those with a poor diet, those that haven't been able to exercise. In a box stall, there's another name for those sensory deprivation chambers, right? Nobody wants to go to solitary confinement, but we put a herd animal in there. So the more that they're with other species, the more that they can move on their own. If we died and they just got out, what would they do? Walk, eat, walk, eat, walk, eat, walk, eat. So that walking and eating, and it's social. Turn out 5 horses on 3 acres of green grass and watch how many are actually sharing the same blade of grass, right? It's a social kind of thing that we just ignore because we don't feel that they have those needs. Those needs are vital to what they can become.
I was reading about allo-grooming and its importance in our horses' like fundamental brain health, in the health of their nervous system, because it gives them access to all sorts of things that gives them, and what I really want to touch on is it gives them access to both agency and social structure, which are 2 things. So the reward system is profound. So can you explain that from a chemical point of view, what's taking place? Because they're selective. There's evidence to show that horses are actually selective on who they allo-groom with. And it increases if there's a stressful situation, which also gives them power and agency. They can control stressful situations by coping or co-regulating with other horses. But I want you to explain it because it gives us 2 of the fundamental 5, what are they called? The 5 domains. Yeah, so 2 of those domains are taking place at the same time. Okay, explain that.
Oxytocin is the neurochemical related to bonding and trust.
Yeah.
Right? So human females have the highest level of oxytocin right after childbirth or when lactating and breastfeeding. So there's this bonding neurochemical that's built into us, and we feel very safe when we have that neurochemical. So that foal with its mother, those horses that are friends, but another horse they feel comfortable with, when they allo-groom, they actually increase their levels of oxytocin. So they feel safe, they feel that they can trust, they feel bonded. And that's what's occurring in the allo-grooming. Could we allo-groom our horses? They get oxytocin, but not in the same way. But we can go out and scratch their withers. They found that that's a spot which actually creates oxytocin. Primates, they groom each other. That's not because, hey, I think you have too many ticks or lice on you, they need to come off. There's a whole behavior. It's comforting. Oftentimes after a fight, where chimps will fight frantically, and then friends of maybe the defeated chimp will come and start grooming that chimp. They take prairie voles who mate for life, and they separate them just for a short amount of time from the community of the other prairie voles. And they have lots of oxytocin receptors, prairie voles do. Cortisol levels will spike, but they'll put that prairie vole back in with the community. The community rushes in and hugs that prairie vole, and that regulates almost immediately, brings on oxytocin. So isolation and solitary confinement, for me, is a punishment. It is for humans. Humans rather have any kind of punishment in prison than go into solitary confinement where they're taken away from others in their species. And we're talking about a herd animal.
Yeah. I think one of a beautiful way to wrap this episode up is you were telling me your opinion, and you referenced Charles Darwin in a beautiful way. And I would really love for you to end this episode talking about that.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we think of survival of the fittest when we think of Charles Darwin, and we think of evolution as the strongest survive.
Yeah.
And people latched onto that. That's a very manly, macho type of way to see the world. But being the strongest would take a tremendous toll, and you'd be fighting all the time to stay the strongest. What Darwin never used that phrase, survival of the fittest. If you read his other book, instead of Origin of the Species, if you read Descent of Man, what he says is that social bonding and helping each other and cooperation, those types of communities thrive, and that's the highest level of evolution. And it's interesting because through evolution, there's a chemical vasotocin. And vasotocin is still present in reptiles. Right? But vasotocin, somewhere down the line, split. What did it become? Vasopressin and oxytocin. Why would we need oxytocin? It's so that we could bond together and help each other get through things. And vasopressin is another social piece. So as we became socially complex mammals, we needed a neurochemical to reflect that. And vasopressin is what makes us protect the herd. It makes us take care of those around us.
Wow.
And oxytocin is what bonds us all together. And these 9 tiny amino acid chains are what that split created our ability to get along and work together as a community. And horses have oxytocin.
Yes.
They have that neurochemical. Let's use it because it feels good.
Yeah. We want our horses to feel good.
I think so.
Dr. Stephen Peters, as always, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Oh, I love to come here and talk with you and talk to your listeners. It's a privilege.
So just before we wrap, I want you to make a mention of your books because you have quite a few, and we're going to include all the show notes. In the show notes, we'll include links to all your books, but why don't you list them out in the title?
Okay. What I really would want you to know about are the last 2 books, Horse Brain Science. I put as much science in here as I possibly could. When people talked about evidence-based horsemanship being a small book,
yeah,
and they wanted more, well, there's more than enough science. I think this will be a valuable resource to people who want to know about horse brain science and want to go deeper than what we've talked about or review some of what we've talked about.
Amazing.
And then with Mark Rashid and Chrissy McDonald, we wrote this book, A Horse's Life. And what we wanted to do is make understanding the horse's nervous system more interesting.
Yes.
Not just a science book. And so we took 19 real life case studies. And these are horses that may have struggled, horses that have been in different environments, but they're all horses that Mark, Chrissy, and I have worked with over the course of time. So there's 19 sort of case studies. Mm-hmm. And then what I do is I provide the neurological postscript under each story. So you get the story that pulls you in, mm-hmm. but it's like neurological detective work. I wonder what was going on with that horse. Well, you read a little farther and you get those notes. So there's a lot of science in here, but our focus is on equine welfare.
Amazing.
So you can find those books anywhere books are sold, Amazon, etc.
We'll also be including in the show notes the link to your Substack and to the evidence-based horsemanship, the original book, the OG book. Cool. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate you.
Oh, appreciate you. Thank you so much.
If the access and insight of this podcast makes you want to go deeper and actually apply these ideas with your own horses, NF Plus is where I've brought together some of the best riders, trainers, horsemen, horsewomen, sports psychologists, and practitioners in the horse world. Inside the NF Plus app, you'll find more than 70 masterclass courses on the challenges so many of us face. Spooky horses, finding a distance, developing a better canter, developing feel, navigating fear and anxiety, or becoming a more thoughtful rider and horse person. Our instructors include Tick Maynard, Will Coleman, Carl Cook, Peter Wild, Dr. Jenny Susser, and Krasinski, and so many more. I created NF Plus as a safe, thoughtful place to learn at your own pace, with teachers and writers who have a wealth of knowledge. You can explore more at noellefloydplus.com or find the link to download the app in the show notes.